Chapter 12. Ellis could not keep still. With an energy that was almost frantic, his fingers nimbly constructed small buildings out of marker caps, erasers, tiny ends of pencils that had been chewed to nothing, and stolen sticky tack. They had gables, second stories, porches, and shutters. When he was satisfied with them, he knocked them over while making explosion noises, or he finished battering rams made from the remains of a broken pencil sharpener and paper clips and bashed them to pieces. He kept flicking glances at Cass and Deegan, who were passing wadded-up notes back and forth when Miss Clemens wasn't looking. Deegan wrote, "We can find the mask." "How? Where did the dream start?" "My house. You should try to remember it." So Cass sat with her head on her hand, half closing her eyes, letting her mind drift back to the dream of the night before. At first, all she could think about was that she couldn't empty her mind at all. It was too full. The classroom was shifting students, Miss Clemens' voice, and the movement of the clock. There was too much Ellis sulking in his chair, being angry or hurt or whatever. But as she grew still, things slowed down. That sky, those stars. Fleeting images shot across her eyes. The stars had almost pulsed, hadn't they? "I went past the school," she said suddenly. "I went past the school," Ellis said in a high voice, glaring at the house he was ripping into tiny parts. It was clear he wanted an argument. Ignoring him, Deegan said to Cass, "Then what?" "I don't know. The stars came after that." She tried to picture them floating around her, blinking on and off. "You two," said Ellis in a low voice, "are crazy." The annoyance grew in Cass again. A huge surge made of things the mask saying about that she could scarcely hear but could feel. "Well, you're racist," she said. Then her eyes opened wide. She could not believe she had said it. Something angry in the mask was encouraging her, and she could hardly help herself. "No, I'm not." "Cass," Deegan said softly, "it's all right. You are so. You told Deegan not to scalp you, and you said something about taxes that I think was supposed to be mean, and you called him an Indian." "He is an Indian," Ellis said. He frowned. "That's not racist. Everyone talks that way. Besides, it's just a joke." "I haven't heard anyone else talk that way, just you." "Is everything all right?" Miss Clemens had walked across the room to them and now was standing over the table. "It's fine." Ellis sat back in his chair, crossing his arms and slouching down. "Cass, Deegan?" They nodded. "How's your work coming along?" It felt like forever till the end of the day. The clock seemed to slow down while Ellis sat in offended silence, twisting the sticky tack into little animals and people and then ripping them apart methodically. Meanwhile, Deegan and Cass fashioned their plan. When the bell finally rang, they waited until everyone else had walked out of the class. They put on their coats slowly so that they could be the last to leave the school. "There he is," Cass whispered. Ellis was standing on the pavement, looking around, waiting for him. They waited up against the wall inside the door. Ellis stood there a long time, by himself. Finally, slowly, he began to walk home. He looked surprisingly small. When he was out of sight, they slipped out the doors and crossed the pavement until they reached the sidewalk. "This is sort of insane," Cass said, peering around at the perfectly ordinary houses and trees. Along the street in one direction was her home. In the other direction lay an area with shops. Neither direction had any stars at all. "You were walking away from your house," Deegan said calmly. "So?" He gestured toward the shop area, but it was a place with stars all around, blinking on and off. He looked at her from under the dark fringe of hair, eyes calm. "Just keep an open mind, and if it turns out that doesn't lead anywhere, what have you lost? Besides your mask." She took a deep breath. "Okay, let's go that way." They passed a pizza place, a convenience store, a second-hand shop. They walked slowly, looking everywhere for something that might resemble stars. But everywhere were ordinary shop windows, ordinary people going in and out of doors, carrying bags. Cass said, "I think this is a mistake." She stopped and caught her breath. Ahead of them, a neon sign blinked on and off. Some of the bulbs burnt out, but enough still glowing. Animated stars seemed to spin around with a jerky motion. Cass could scarcely breathe as she read the words, "Starlight Diner, our food is stellar."